Welcome to This Explainer. I've got my veteran collector's hat on today, and we are diving straight into an absolute masterclass on the golden era of G.I. Joe. We're talking specifically about that incredible, legendary run from 1982 to 1994. These really aren't just toys anymore. They are highly appreciating assets and massive pieces of pop culture history. So whether you're staring at a dusty box in your parents' attic or you're an active buyer hunting on today's secondary market, consider this your foundational briefing. Let's get right into it. Have you ever wondered what actually turns a tiny 3-inch piece of plastic into a highly sought-after piece of history? Well, it's this crazy, fascinating combination of deep nostalgia, absolutely revolutionary toy engineering, and a fiercely competitive secondary market that dictates the value today. Like I said, we aren't just talking about toys here. We are literally talking about cultural artifacts. All right, here is our mission briefing for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with the 3.75-inch revolution, move into exactly why 1985 was the golden year, explore the holy grails of epic vehicles, learn how to actually navigate the modern market, and finally, look inside the ultimate collector's guide. Section 1. The 3.75-inch revolution. To really understand why this era is so wildly collectible, we have to look at the massive pivot Hasbro made to save the brand. So, way back in 1964, G.I. Joe was actually launched as a massive 12-inch figure. They were basically trying to capture the boys' toy market by directly rivaling the huge success of Mattel's Barbie. And it was a hit, but eventually the line just kind of faded out by 1978. Then in 1982, Hasbro made this brilliant, incredibly bold decision. They shrank the figures all the way down to a 3.75-inch scale. Why? Well, they were watching the staggering, undeniable success of the Star Wars toy line. But Hasbro added their own special magic. They gave every single character a distinct personality, a military profession, cool code names, and those legendary file cards right on the back of the packaging that mapped out their entire backstory. This imaginative lore kept the brand booming for over a decade, right up until 1994, when a merger with Kenner gave Hasbro control of the Star Wars line, which prompted them to shelve G.I. Joe for 1995. The immediate financial impact of that redesign was just staggering. $51 million. That's how much that brand new, smaller scale generated in 1982 alone. And no joke, they nearly doubled that the very next year. The new scale wasn't just cheaper to produce, it was an absolute magnet for a whole new generation of kids. And what started in 1982 as a relatively modest rollout of just 11 figures and 4 vehicles absolutely exploded. By the time the line wrapped up in 1994, Hasbro had produced over 500 total figures and nearly 250 vehicles and playsets. Think about that for a second. With over 500 figures, trying to collect a complete set today is this endless, thrilling treasure hunt. Especially when you factor in trying to track down all those tiny, delicate little backpacks and visors that inevitably got sucked up by vacuum cleaners in the 1980s. Section 2. 1985, the golden year. If you talk to any serious veteran collector or look at the historical data, there is one year that stands head and shoulders above the rest. I absolutely love this quote from the Toy Wizard's review of the line's history. They simply write, "But then, 1985 hit, and seriously, damn." It perfectly captures the energy of that year. If the 1982 launch was the spark, 1985 was the explosion that cemented G.I. Joe into global pop culture dominance. So why does the 1985 lineup remain a top choice for modern collectors? Everything evolved so dramatically. The colors were suddenly much brighter, the character designs were just popping with personality, and the product variety was completely off the charts. You were getting iconic, legendary villains like Destro and Cobra Commander right in their prime. And of course, this physical toy boom was perfectly synced with the companion animated series. Because the cartoon aired daily, it was essentially acting as a 30-minute commercial, driving crazy demand and cementing these characters into the cultural zeitgeist forever. Section 3. Holy Grails, Epic Vehicles. While the figures were definitely the core, Hasbro built a massive world for them to interact in. Listen, all toy lines create accessories, right? But Hasbro took it to an entirely different dimension at a scale that still baffles toy engineers today. You have the Mobat tank, the Sky Striker jet, the Defiant space shuttle, and the mighty USS Flag. If you were a kid in the 80s, just seeing these heavy hitters in a catalog was a jaw-dropping experience. Today, they are the prestige items that completely define an elite collection. But I'll warn you, when you're hunting for these massive pieces in today's secondary market, the true challenge isn't just finding the hull of the vehicle. It's ensuring all the delicate, easily broken plastic missiles, radar dishes, and engine covers are actually still intact. Now, the Defiant shuttle and the USS Flag remain the ultimate crowning achievements. A 7-foot-long toy aircraft carrier. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. Securing one today usually requires a second mortgage and a very understanding spouse. Finding these incredibly rare, massive pieces, especially with all their intricate, easily lost parts completely intact, is widely considered the absolute peak mountain climb for any serious G.I. Joe collector.
Section 4. Navigating the market. How do we take all this history and apply it to collecting today? Let's get into the trenches with some essential valuation tips.
If you're new to the secondary market scene, you absolutely need to memorize this term, MOC, or Mint on Card. This refers to a figure perfectly sealed in its original, unopened packaging. While loose figures from this era are actually still pretty readily available, finding figures in perfect MOC condition is incredibly difficult, which drastically drives up their valuation. And here's a pro tip. When assessing an MOC figure online, don't just look at the seal. You need to look really closely for things like card warp or bubble yellowing, because those are very common degradations that will significantly impact the final price. There are really three main factors driving prices today. First is the time period. Specifically, figures from that 1982 to 1984 window are extremely scarce and good condition. With loose figures from that era, you're constantly fighting against vintage issues like broken internal O-rings or missing thumbs. Second, as we just discussed, is that pristine mint-on-card condition. And third is modern media demand. Younger generations are heavily craving 80s and 90s nostalgia right now. Plus, with ongoing comic book series and Hasbro planning more modern G.I. Joe movies, the cultural relevance stays super high, which keeps the investment outlook very steady for this vintage era. Which leaves us with one final thought to close out our explainer today. Armed with this new knowledge of the 1982 to 1994 golden era, the legendary 1985 lineup, and those massive jaw-dropping vehicles, whether you're heading the secondary market or just rummaging through your parents' attic this weekend, what is your personal holy grail G.I. Joe item? Are you hunting for a mint 1982 figure, or are you trying to find enough space in your living room for a 7-foot aircraft carrier? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and hey, happy hunting out there.